Have you ever noticed that the deeper your thoughts go, the more distant you feel from others? That the more you understand, the less people seem willing to listen? This isn't just your imagination. Society has always been wary of those who think too deeply. Not because these individuals are wrong, but because they perceive truths that others would rather ignore. History is filled with examples of brilliant minds who were ridiculed, silenced, or dismissed simply because they saw the world differently. From Socrates and Galileo to Nikola Tesla, many of history's greatest thinkers were met not with admiration, but with resistance. Their ideas did not lack intelligence or merit. On the contrary, they often challenged the very foundations of what people were comfortable believing. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, known for his brutally honest perspectives, argued that intelligence is not necessarily a gift, but a curse. To see the world with unfiltered clarity is to recognize uncomfortable truths, and those who do often find themselves standing alone. Not because they choose solitude, but because society prefers the comfort of illusions over the weight of reality. Why does society resist those who think differently? The answer lies deep within human psychology. Consider this. When you stand next to someone with exceptional physical strength, you don't necessarily feel weak. You might even admire their power. When you meet someone who is extraordinarily wealthy, you may feel envious, but you don't take it as a personal insult. But when you encounter someone with a mind far sharper than your own, something strange happens. Psychologists refer to this as the mirror effect. A highly intelligent or deeply thoughtful person does more than just introduce new ideas. They unintentionally hold up a mirror to the limitations of those around them. And that is not easily forgiven. Their very presence can make others feel inadequate, even if they never say a word. Unlike physical strength of material wealth, which can be admired from a distance, intelligence has a way of challenging people on a personal level. It forces them to confront their own blind spots, their flawed reasoning, their lack of insight. And most people would rather reject the mirror than face what it reveals. This is why society often resists, mocks, or even ostracizes those with profound intellect. Not because they are wrong, but because they make others uncomfortable in ways that few are willing to admit. Why does intelligence provoke discomfort more than any other kind of advantage? Physical strength, wealth, and beauty are all external traits. They do not directly challenge a person's sense of self. You can admire someone's athleticism without questioning your own abilities. You can envy another person's wealth without feeling like your fundamental understanding of the world is being threatened. But intelligence is different. We define ourselves by our thoughts, our beliefs, and our understanding of reality. Our sense of identity is deeply tied to what we know to be true. When we encounter someone with a deeper, sharper intellect, it does more than simply present new ideas. It forces us to confront the limitations of our own thinking. It shakes the foundation of what we take for granted, making us question whether we have truly understood as much as we believed. This is not just an intellectual challenge, it is a psychological one. A superior intellect can feel like an unspoken critique of our own reasoning, an unsettling reminder that our perspective might be incomplete or even flawed. And for many, this is difficult to accept. Instead of admiring intelligence the way we admire strength or beauty, people often resist it. Not necessarily because the intelligent person is arrogant or condescending, but because their very existence forces others to acknowledge their own limitations, something the human ego instinctively fights against. This is why profound thinkers often find themselves met with skepticism, defensiveness, or even hostility. It is not that society despises intelligence itself, but that intelligence, especially when it sees too clearly or questions too deeply, demands a kind of self-reflection that most would rather avoid. Why are deep thinkers often marginalized by society? History has shown that those who think differently do more than just question existing ideas. They challenge the very core of human identity. People have an inherent tendency to protect themselves from discomfort, and when confronted with a deeply analytical mind, many instinctively choose to dismiss or ignore rather than engage. Have you ever tried introducing a complex idea in casual conversation, only to be met with blank stares or awkward silence? Have you noticed how people often change the subject the moment a discussion becomes too profound? This is not mere coincidence. It is a psychological defense mechanism at play. The psychological barriers to deep thinking. Several cognitive biases contribute to the resistance against deep thinkers. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Those with limited knowledge tend to overestimate their understanding, while truly intelligent individuals often second-guess themselves. This creates a paradox: those who know the least believe they know the most, leading them to dismiss or resist deeper insights. Status quo bias. The human brain prefers familiar ideas over complex truths because unfamiliarity breeds discomfort. People are naturally drawn to simplicity and certainty, even when those ideas are flawed. The backfire effect. When people are confronted with information that contradicts their existing beliefs, they do not necessarily change their minds. Instead, they double down on their original views, reinforcing their resistance to new ways of thinking. Does modern society truly value intelligence? Not really. In social settings, confidence is often valued more than intelligence. People gravitate toward those who exude certainty, even if their ideas are shallow. This is why populist leaders, motivational speakers, and social media influencers often dominate public discourse. They tell people what they want to hear rather than challenging them to think critically. On the other hand, those who dare to question widely accepted beliefs often struggle to gain support. The paradox of intelligence is that the deeper one seeks the truth, the more isolated they become from the majority. Society does not necessarily reward intellectual depth. It rewards relatability, charisma, and the ability to simplify complexity into sound bites. Ultimately, the world is not hostile to intelligence itself, but to the disruption it brings. People crave certainty, comfort, and validation far more than they crave truth. And those who seek truth above all else must often walk that path alone. What does science say about the fear of intelligence? Modern neuroscience provides a fascinating explanation for why intelligence, particularly when perceived as superior, often provokes discomfort, resentment, or even outright hostility. Studies reveal that when a person feels intellectually outmatched or challenged, their amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing fear and emotional responses, becomes highly active. This means that intelligence doesn't merely create a mild sense of unease. It can actually trigger a primitive survival response, akin to the reaction people have when they sense immediate danger. But why does intelligence, which is not a physical threat, activate the same fear circuitry as a tangible danger? The answer lies deep in our evolutionary history. For the majority of human existence, survival was not primarily dependent on intelligence, but on social cohesion. Early humans lived in tightly knit tribal communities where group acceptance was essential. To be cast out from the tribe meant exposure to predators, starvation, and almost certain death. Because of this, the human brain evolved to prioritize belonging over understanding. In other words, being socially accepted was far more valuable than being the smartest person in the group. When an individual with a deeply analytical or highly intellectual mind appears, they often disrupt this equilibrium. Their insights challenge established beliefs, societal norms, and even the fundamental ways in which people understand the world. This creates an inherent conflict. While knowledge itself is neutral, the implications of knowledge can be deeply unsettling. When a deep thinker introduces a new perspective that contradicts what someone has always believed, it forces that person into an uncomfortable position. Either they must reconsider their worldview or reject the new information outright. More often than not, the latter happens. Psychologists have identified several cognitive biases that contribute to this resistance. The Dunning-Kruger effect: people with limited knowledge tend to overestimate their understanding, while those who are truly intelligent often doubt themselves. This creates a paradox. Those who know the least often feel the most confident in their beliefs, while those who know the most are more likely to acknowledge uncertainty. As a result, people who lack depth of knowledge may outright dismiss or even resent those with superior understanding. Status quo bias: the human brain is naturally wired to favor the familiar over the complex. New or challenging ideas require cognitive effort and disrupt mental comfort, making people instinctively prefer simpler, more digestible narratives, even if they are flawed. The backfire effect: when people encounter information that directly contradicts their existing beliefs, instead of adjusting their views, they often react defensively, reinforcing their original opinions even more strongly. In other words, the more you try to introduce deep, nuanced thinking, the more some individuals will resist, seeing it as an attack rather than an opportunity for growth. Does modern society truly value intelligence? At first glance, we might assume that in a world driven by technology, innovation, and progress, intelligence would be highly prized. However, in many aspects of society, intelligence often takes a backseat to other qualities, particularly confidence and charisma. Socially, people tend to gravitate toward those who exude certainty, even if their ideas are simplistic or misguided. This is why populist leaders, motivational speakers, and social media influencers wield such influence. They do not challenge people to think deeply. Instead, they provide easy answers, emotional appeal, and a sense of belonging, which are far more psychologically satisfying than intellectual rigor. Conversely, those who ask difficult questions or challenge mainstream thinking often find themselves struggling for acceptance. Intellectual depth can be alienating, not because deep thinkers intend to separate themselves, but because the nature of their thoughts naturally distances them from conventional discourse. The paradox of intelligence is that the deeper one pursues truth, the further they often drift from the majority. Society rewards relatability over complexity, confidence over nuance, and affirmation over introspection. This is why intelligence, rather than being universally admired, is often met with skepticism, resistance, or even hostility. How can deep thinkers thrive without isolation? Schopenhauer, one of the most unflinchingly honest philosophers, did not simply diagnose the problem. He also proposed practical ways for deep thinkers to navigate a world that often resists them. Embrace solitude rather than seeing isolation as a punishment. View it as an opportunity. Many of history's greatest minds have thrived in solitude, using it as a space for intellectual and creative growth. Solitude allows deep thinkers to explore ideas freely, without the constraints of social conformity. Seek like-minded individuals. While mainstream society may resist complex ideas, there are always those who appreciate intellectual depth. Instead of trying to fit into the majority, focus on finding a niche, whether through books, philosophy, academic circles, or online communities, where deep discussions are encouraged. Observe and adapt. Not every setting is conducive to deep conversations. Learn to assess your audience. Some people are simply not ready to engage with complex ideas, and forcing intellectual discussions in the wrong environment can lead to frustration. Instead, choose when and where to share profound insights. Sometimes silence is more effective than debate. Communicate effectively. Intelligence is not just about deep thinking, but also about understanding how to convey ideas in a way that others can grasp. The most influential thinkers in history were not just brilliant, they were also skilled communicators. Learning to simplify complexity without diluting meaning can make profound ideas more accessible. The ultimate dilemma of intelligence. To be highly intelligent is not just to see the world more clearly, it is also to recognize the limitations of human nature. Deep thinkers must navigate the delicate balance between truth and social acceptance, between intellectual honesty and the need for connection. At its core, intelligence is not about proving superiority, it is about understanding. And sometimes that understanding includes the realization that not everyone is ready to face certain truths. Instead of fighting to be heard by those unwilling to listen, the wisest approach is to find harmony, knowing when to challenge ideas, when to remain silent, and when to walk away in pursuit of deeper, more meaningful intellectual connections. Because in the end, the value of intelligence is not in how many people recognize it, but in how deeply it allows one to see. Why do intellectuals struggle for acceptance, especially in their own time? History repeatedly shows that deep thinkers, scientists, and intellectuals often face resistance, ridicule, or even hostility during their lifetimes. The reason for this is not merely a societal oversight, it is a fundamental characteristic of human nature and the structures that govern our world. Take a look at the digital age we live in today. Who commands the most attention on social media? Is it the scholars, the philosophers, or the scientists? Rarely. Instead, the spotlight shines on those who can distill complex ideas into catchy, digestible sound bites, phrases that are easy to share, emotionally charged, and instantly gratifying. Serious intellectual discourse struggles to gain traction because depth requires time, while viral content thrives on immediacy, emotion, and ease of consumption. The algorithms that govern our digital spaces are not designed to promote deep thought. They are designed to maximize engagement. And nothing fuels engagement more effectively than outrage, controversy, or humor elements that often push rational intellectual discussions to the margins. As a result, we see the rise of echo chambers, digital environments where people are continuously fed information that reinforces their pre-existing beliefs. This phenomenon makes them increasingly resistant to new perspectives, especially those that challenge the status quo. Within this framework, deep thinkers who introduce nuanced or uncomfortable truths are often ignored, misunderstood, or outright attacked.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.